Hi everyone, my name is Joy, and my capstone topic is Rethinking about Work and Life Communication, examining work-life policies and employee discourses in the United States and China. I decided to conduct the study because, as a younger generation, I care about maintaining work and life. In addition, organizations now are offering more work-life policies. However, studies have found that employees often avoid using work-life policies due to fear of social stigma and professional backlash, which further prompts us to think about how do these work-life policies support work-life ideologies. Furthermore, communication research has called for the need to investigate diverse cultural perspectives and examine work-life policies in varied organizational settings beyond the US. This study adds new insights by conducting a cross-cultural analysis between the United States and China. So the study poses two research questions. How do organizational policies around work and life shape work-life ideologies in the United States and China? In what ways do differences in the acceptance of varying work-life ideologies affect the workplace in the United States and in China? For the literature review, first, I conceptualized work and life. Work-life ideology refers to the individual level beliefs of work and life. In fact, according to a survey, 82% of employees expect their employers to support them in achieving work-life balance. Some common work-life policies include flex time, PTO, remote work options, parental leave, and child care services, and so on. Communication studies have also found that formal communication, such as organizational policy documents, mission statements, and corporate websites, as well as informal communication, such as daily conversations and social cues, jointly construct how work-life policies are understood, enacted, and experienced within organizations. As organizations implement policies that strategically draw the boundary between work and life, Ashworth et al.'s boundary theory offers a great framework for understanding how individuals and organizations, through ongoing negotiation between personal preferences and organizational expectations, construct work-life boundaries. The two key dimensions of this theory are flexibility, which is the degree to which a boundary between work and life can be adjusted in both temporal and spatial aspects, as well as permeability, which is the degree to which elements from one domain can enter another domain. A key concept of this theory is spillover. While some people prefer clear separation, others are more comfortable with integration, which means that they will be experiencing spillover between work and life domains, depending on their boundary management preferences and role demand. Therefore, this illustration offers an example of how boundary theory can be applied to work and life. Last, work-life ideologies can occur in different contexts. For example, organizational studies have explored how ICTs and the COVID pandemic have blurred the boundaries between work and life. Rather than viewing work-life as competing forces requiring balance, these perspectives highlight work-life enrichment, which is the idea that each domain can enhance and support the other. Globalization also encourages us to view work-life ideologies not as fixed universal norms, but as fluid and shaped by cultural dynamics. This study uses a qualitative content analysis to understand work-life policies and work-life ideologies in the United States and China. For RQ1, I examined the corporate websites and social media accounts. Since Chinese corporate websites often do not have work-life policies, most of them were on their recruitment posts. For RQ2, I examined recent news articles to understand the trending terms around work and life. Specifically, to examine work-life policies, I selected the top 50 companies from the 2024 Fortune 500 list. For the findings, RQ1 asks, how are work-life ideologies constructed through work-life policies? The first finding is organizations as control mechanisms. For example, when I looked at their websites, a lot of the companies posit themselves as caregivers. For example, they say, we care about you, we take care of our employees, and we support our employees. The use of terms like offer, support, and care implies that maintaining work-life balance is a gift granted by the employer. While these companies appear supportive, they simultaneously reinforce control over how life outside work is constructed and valued. My second finding is flexibility in time and location. Flexible time arrangements are mostly offered by companies with retail services. They often frame flexibility as a transaction. For example, with compressed work weeks, you work longer days in exchange for additional days off. They also frame flexibility in time as a reward. For example, employees who stay with us for over 30 years earn as much as 6 weeks of paid time off each year. However, companies are also starting to offer flexible work locations. For example, Microsoft has this policy, a mix of work styles across work site, work location, and work hours designed to meet the diverse needs of our global workforce, empowering you to design a work experience that works best for you and your team. The example of flexible work location reframes the existing work-life ideology from a transaction to an integration of both domains of work and life. My last analysis is that organizations are starting to blur the boundaries through work-life enrichment. Companies now are offering education support, such as tuition reimbursement for employees to pursue further education or certifications for personal development. However, while many companies provide financial support for education, time is rarely acknowledged as part of the policy. In contrast, Walmart Academy and Apple University are framed as integrating both financial and time support, offering employees the opportunity to build desired skill sets while simultaneously advancing their careers. Additionally, many companies are offering paid time off for purpose-driven activities, such as community service and volunteer work. These initiatives reflect a shift in work-life ideology from viewing work and life as competing domains to framing the workplace as a space for achieving personal fulfillment and life success. Now, for the Chinese context, my first analysis is that companies often have state-mandated baselines across all companies. Most companies offered 5 insurances and 1 fund, and also paid time off that are mandated under state labor laws. Organizations often strategically frame their work-life policies aligned with the CPC, which is the Communist Party's national development goals. For example, state-owned enterprises offer several internal and external training programs for employees' professional development, but it is also implemented to uphold the CPC's strategy of invigorating China through science and education, developing a quality workforce, and promoting innovative-driven development. The second analysis found that most work-life policies in China are work-centered framing of life. They offer free on-site annual health checkups, birthday vacations, and birthday gifts, as well as free overwork meals on site. Organizations frame them as ways to take care of employees' lives so their work is not disrupted. Some companies also offer performance rewards as part of their work-life policies. For example, employees may forego their entitled work-life benefits in order to compete for performance-based rewards. Most work-life policies in China emphasize on stability and collectivism. For example, they offer free dormitory housing, on-site cafeterias, and transportation shuttles. This also reflects the cultural value of the iron rice bowl, which in Chinese means that a stable job with guaranteed lifetime employment and benefits. In this context, providing daily necessities through work-life policies signals that organizations are actually committed to caring for its workforce. Lastly, most corporate websites and Weibo accounts demonstrate limited discursive flexibility, and they often rely on administrative language and practical listening. The messaging also remains policy-driven and bureaucratic rather than rhetorically persuasive or empathetic. This reflects a broader constraint such as state content regulation and cultural expectations of uniformity. For RQ2, I dwelled on news articles to understand the trending terms that reflect people's perception of work and life. So, RQ2 asks, what are the perceptions of work-life ideologies in the United States and China? So, for the United States, my finding reveals that overall, terms like the Great Exhaustion aligns with existing literature and implicates that the COVID-19 pandemic and changes in the usage of ICT create overwork and digital overload that makes the boundaries between work and life more permeable. However, other trends, such as quiet vacationing, career catfishing, office ghosting, and career badging, indicate a shift in employees' perceptions of work-life ideologies. Younger generation employees are also reclaiming time and autonomy without directly challenging the organization's control. They prioritize personal well being and flexibility over traditional metrics of productivity and loyalty. Work life ideology, then, in the United States, is being renegotiated not through formal policy reform, but through subtle everyday acts of resistance and adaptation. My findings of the Chinese context reveals that the emergence of Tangping, which means lying flat, reflects a growing desire among younger generation to prioritize life over work, which signals resistance to China's dominant work-centric ideology. However, because Tangping remains largely a passive mindset rather than an actionable movement, it highlights the limitations Chinese youth face in challenging bureaucratic institutions and systemic expectations. Within this political and cultural context, it remains difficult for employees to openly prioritize life over work. Finally, I will end my presentation with discussion and conclusion. My analysis found that there are similarities and differences between the United States and China. Both US and Chinese organizations construct work life policies around organizational priorities rather than employee needs. However, they use different rhetorical strategies. For example, US companies often frame themselves as caregivers, portraying work life benefits as perks or transactional exchanges for employees' time and labor. In contrast, Chinese companies frame work-life policies as aligned with state mandates and national development goals. A key difference between the US and Chinese contexts lies in the driver of framing work-life policies. In the United States, policies are constructed and marketed by individual companies, often with emotionally appealing and creative narratives. In contrast, in China, work-life policies are standardized by state mandates. The CPC's ideology plays a direct role in shaping not only the benefits, but also how they are communicated. Zooming into work-life ideologies in both countries, my study finds that younger generations in both countries are resisting dominant work-centric norms. Younger employees in China face structural constraints, such as state surveillance and collectivist norm, that limit their ability to act on resistance ideologies, such as Tangping. In contrast, in the US, younger generation employees engage in subtle acts of boundary negotiation that reflects greater personal autonomy. This also suggests that boundary management is not merely a personal or organizational choice, but it might be deeply embedded with broader socio-political structures. Finally, an analysis of both corporate websites and corporate social media accounts reveals that companies strategically use digital platforms to shape workplace ideologies. While corporate websites clearly outline formal work-life policies, social media content primarily highlights work-life enrichment programs, such as employee volunteers and learning opportunities that emphasize lifestyle and personal fulfillment. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I am open for any questions.